is a vibrant crowd. They don't want to stop talking. It's good. This is what you want. You want to come here and network and hang out and
absolutely
talk FL and DP and all the cool stuff.
We run a lot of these community events, and it's just always so great to hear from users live how the framework is used, how the technology is used, and also what they would like to do with it. And I also have a couple of questions about that for you. So maybe let's jump right in. First of all, thanks for making the time today.
Sure.
I was really
glad to be here
to doing that. And I want to start with something really timely that just happened. So there was this recent discussion about whether open source AI was just a red herring. So I'm really curious. You worked on PyTorch, you worked on Llama. What's your take? Is open source AI just a red herring?
Ooh, red herring. That's a strong statement. I mean, so I guess a little bit about my background. I guess I mean, this is kind of how I got my start in machine learning and AI was through open source. I think that's actually, and that's a kind of a common thing, because like I think a lot of people get involved with communities, and they, people love to contribute and and just like learn, and they start to pick things up and build, and it's the way you kind of like it's like open source is like the gateway drug of like AI in a lot of ways, right? You can be like anywhere in the world. You can be like a university student. You could be a startup founder. You could be doing anything, and basically, like open source is like the true way to democratize, technology and actually collaborate. So I got my start working on the Cafe project at UC Berkeley, which is definitely going to date me, but that's okay. I met Yanqing when he was a PhD student at Berkeley, and then he went on to Google Brain, and I worked with him at Facebook, and now he's at NVIDIA. And I think this role of AI would grind to a halt, I think, if there was not open source, if we did not have open models, open frameworks, open tools, libraries. Like, I think every time I kind of think things are sort of going to stall out in the open world, like they accelerate. I think there's a number of ways to go to market. I mean, obviously, you guys go to market around Flower in an open way. We ourselves, like I've been with Meta now going on 8 years. We treat open source as a competitive advantage in a lot of ways, right? We built Cafe 2, or contributed Cafe, built Cafe 2, PyTorch, Llama open source models, all the things around those. We just released our coding world models this week. So, Gabriel sign-off is like elated. It's been something he's been working on for a long time. So 32B computational world model, state of the art, incredible work by the team. And so I think that's, I'm seeing your email, by the way. But I don't think we're at a point where I'd call it a red herring. I think probably what we're all waiting for is like the next frontier model to be open sourced. And that's what we want, right? So, and I can't tell you when that's coming. I would like to, but I think that's actually, that I think is actually what we all want. And then the world can truly build on frontier technology. So I think DeepSeek was interesting. The Quen models this week were really amazing, I have to say. But I think we're all waiting for like a true frontier model to land in open source.
I mean, that is the perfect segue to my next question, actually. I think this week was really interesting. We saw a lot of releases coming from Quen.
Yep.
Some really interesting ones. Quen 3 Max, a 1 trillion parameter model. I personally have found Quen 3 Next pretty interesting. Some really interesting properties there. There was also, a while ago, there was DeepSeek R1, which made just huge waves. So I wonder, it begs a little bit the question, has leadership in open source AI, has it shifted away a little bit from the Bay Area? And we had, of course, there's still a lot of open source AI happening here. There was also GPT OSS, for example. But the reception of that was a little bit mixed. So the question is really, if has leadership shifted away, and if it has, when do you think and how will the Bay Area reclaim the lead?
I mean, I think it's maybe more of a sovereign AI question, I would say, more than just the Bay Area. I think the U.S. I think there's a lot of interest in building sovereign technology now. It's definitely been kind of in the discussion like last several months. Last probably 3-6 months around how do we actually reclaim that lead and have the world build on our technology. And I think it'll happen. I think there's a lot of folks, maybe not all of this is public yet, but there's definitely a lot of things that are happening in the works that I'm seeing. So I think like there's definitely a lot of interest more broadly to do that. A lot of investment that's happening. I think, I think the Chinese companies, the Quens and the DeepSeek, like they've done like a phenomenal job of like putting out some open source, some great stuff. ByteDance has like also put out some great like libraries and frameworks. The Vero project is fantastic in the RL space. There's good stuff coming from a lot of companies, but like they've done a good job of being like very early and building a community around their work. So I have a lot of respect. I mean, those are the team over there is actually the team I worked with ages and ages ago at Amazon. So I know the team over there, and they know what they're doing. They've been working in the open in AI and for a very long time. So I think like, to me, like, I think we're in a little bit of a lull in on the US side. I think it's going to change though. Like, and it'll change like pretty quickly. I think within the next 6 months to a year, you're going to see a lot of companies, a lot of things happening on the US side to respond. But I would say like right now, the best models are definitely like the open models are definitely coming out of China. OpenAI is really cool to see Sam release those. I think I talked to him about those models like 4 years ago, probably, or almost 4 years ago. He said he wanted to release open models. They never really had the bandwidth or the folks to be able to focus and the energy to put around open weight models. They released them. I mean, they're good models. I was a little disappointed they didn't release the base models. Those have been fun to post-train, but still like the post-train models are good. They're a little probably too safe from my experience. Like I played with them and I was a little disappointed that the refusal rate was very high. But it's cool to see them release. I hope they keep releasing models because that'd be good for the ecosystem. Yeah. So.
It was cool to see some interesting architectural choices coming out of these models. That was pretty nice, I found. Also, the US made a decision in the national AI strategy to include open source as a core pillar.
Yeah.
I think that's something I found was obviously pro open source.
Yeah.
So I found that to be a really, really strong move. Was Meta involved in that strategy to some extent?
I mean, we're always talking to those folks. We have a pretty strong policy team. I think I remember I was at the Sequoia event maybe a couple months back now, and was chatting with Jensen, and he was there. Sam was there as well, and Jensen got up on stage over there at their Ascent event and kind of talked about how he'd been back and forth to Washington constantly. Right? He's just like he hadn't worn a suit in years. Yet he had to go buy a suit and and go to the White House and so on. And he's been lobbying obviously for open weight models, I think, and for sovereign technology a lot. So I think, like I said, there's a lot of folks pushing for this, and I think it's very different. I think than even a couple of years ago when we were building Llama models and we were worried constantly if we were going to run into like the computational like roof line that would trigger export controls, and it was just it was kind of a weird situation with the original executive order. I still think regulation, like good, like smart regulation is good around AI, but I think like putting arbitrary numbers around like flops and all that doesn't really help. I think the ideas of like sandboxing, I think actually has a lot of merits. But I think like there's a lot of folks like lobbying right now, and I think it's smart for us to embrace open source.
Yeah, I mean the flops limitation is definitely an interesting choice.
How do you define that, anyways? Right? Like, is it pre-training, post-training? It was now you got RL, so you put a bunch of flops in RL, and is that included? I don't know.
And then you see something like Qwen 3 next, where you have still really good performance, but the training cost drops by 80%.
Right.
So suddenly the flops limit maybe invalidated.
It's hard to evaluate. It's really hard to evaluate what is frontier. It can't be flops because that's very arbitrary. But
yeah. While we're on the topic of open source, we now have the Meta Superintelligence Lab. I know you mentioned you can't announce a new open source model yet. Or maybe yet, I don't know. But I think one question, and I don't know if you can speak to that already, but I think it's on everyone's mind, is the Superintelligence Lab, is it going to be a shift away from open source for Meta? Or is it, as I think many in this room hope, a doubling down on open source?
Yeah.
We already saw some papers coming out of the lab, which was great.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the fact of the matter is there's still a lot of discussions that are happening, I think, on our longer term strategy. I think what you see though is this week we're still releasing stuff. We still have a fair, which has a very strong pedigree, a lot of great researchers producing great research. Like I said, we just released this week the computational world models, and those are pretty impressive. I don't think we're slowing down in terms of like our open work, like PyTorch and a lot of work we're doing. I mean, we've released things that on PyTorch that we haven't even used yet for like our next generation models they're already in. We're already collaborating with external folks in open source, so we definitely lean that way because we see value in it. And there's a lot of like value in us collaborating externally and with hardware vendors and partners, with other labs. There's great ways for us to kind of learn, and we get a lot of we just derive a lot of value from it. In terms of like open sourcing everything, which maybe is like implied in the question, I think we're thinking we're a bit more thoughtful maybe going forward on what we release and what we don't release and what the goal is. I don't. We'll probably. When we released like our largest model, which is the 405B dense model, probably a year was it like last July, I think. It was the largest model at the time in the world, dense model, not MOE. So very, very expensive to at inference time. You had to do essentially distributed inference. At bfloat 16 precision. And not a lot of folks could use it right out of the gate. We had a lot of meetings with Mark on, do we release it? Do we not release it? What do we do? In the end, we decided to release it. I think a lot of what's interesting is like a lot of our models in the past, we would release almost like time to market with our own products, which is a little strange to do that. And so I think like now we're thinking through like, what do we release? Why do we release it? And so on. So I wouldn't say like the door is closed. We're just being we're just thinking through, I think, a little more of the strategy and how we release things and what we release. But to release, you can imagine like the analog here is like OpenAI like launches ChatGPT on GPT-5, and then they also release the model in parallel in open source. Would that be weird? I think it would be. That's kind of what we were doing for a good while, which would be great. I mean, it's fine, but yeah, no, we're definitely being a little more thoughtful, and can't really comment officially on that, but hopefully some news soon.
Yeah, I was happy in any case that on the infrastructure side, on PyTorch, Torch Titan, Torch FT, there's a lot of momentum, and I think it rather accelerated rather than slowing down. Are you using these tools just one-to-one internally, or is this sort of the other direction? Is it a gradual open sourcing?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff we do use one-to-one. I mean, PyTorch is one of those. Like a lot of the libraries kind of sit in our Meta PyTorch repo, kind of formerly known as PyTorch Labs. We rebranded it after the foundation, the shift to the foundation. We do leverage a lot of these in open source because we do, for example, like we burst up to other clouds, for example, on like some of our research when we need more compute. And to have a really like super portable open source stack is like really beneficial. If you want to scale up and train a big model on another cloud, if you want to do like experimentation, like having those things being like one-to-one in open source. People, by the way, like just love to develop in open source. It's just easier than like our internal tooling. No offense to our internal folks, but it's just we've actually we've actually refactored like a lot of our projects internally to feel like they're like you're developing kind of on in more of like an open environment, and that's accelerated a lot of our research, our like info researchers in our labs. So we tend to like for a lot of reasons, it tends to generate good quality code. It allows us to collaborate. It's just easier more generally to develop. You can also like incorporate a lot of hardware in CI, which is hugely beneficial because, we have NVIDIA, we have AMD, we have our own silicon called MTIA that we believe is really important to us and in our future applications. So for us to be able to pull in like, additional hardware makes it a lot easier because you can share, the code for CI. You can write, GitHub Action runners. You can have other vendors, contribute. So it makes a huge difference in collaborations.
And I think from an overall perspective, looking at the ecosystem, it definitely worked. PyTorch and Llama are maybe the two biggest cornerstones of the open AI ecosystem.
Yep.
Open space AI.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit, and talking about training. So early on, we talked about data. So I'm quite curious on your perspective on how you think the data side of pre-training will evolve. So we've seen that Llama 3 used roughly 15 trillion tokens, which is close to all the high-quality English text you can get on the web. There's now, and obviously there's a limit we're hitting there. There's now a lot of excitement about synthetic data and also RL environments. So how do you think this will continue to scale? And there's also, with any of these approaches, there's certain challenges that come with them. RL environments, in my opinion, if you want them to be really useful, they should be grounded in reality somehow. Things like that. How do you see this evolve over the next couple of years?
I mean, I think it's all going to grow. I mean, if I look at, I don't think we actually ever published the Llama 4 pre-training, so I can't comment exactly how large it was, but it was quite a bit larger. And I mean, if you look at Llama 2 to Llama 3, it was like, I think a 7x increase in pre-training. And then you can imagine, obviously, Llama 4 got quite a bit bigger, and then, our future models are quite a bit larger in terms of data sets. And, especially if you include all the multimodal, audio, video, image, all the, plus text, so you start to, the pre-training data sets get really, really large. Obviously, synthetic data, we actually do generate a lot of synthetic data for these models. RL is interesting because like the environments, I mean, I think it's funny, like every startup I know is all of a sudden an environment startup and doing RL. It's crazy. I get outreach like every day, multiple startups. Hey, we're building environments. Great. But I think that's good. I think that, I don't know how you monetize environments though, like, or how you build a business around it, but it's good, I guess, to have a lot of environments in the ecosystem. I think, to me, it's like everything I think is going to grow. I think pre-training will continue to grow. Obviously, probably not at the pace of other parts of, like, if you take the compute budget, RL seems to be the fastest growing. And I was actually doing a review with my data science team yesterday, and just like looking at across the company, all the flop, and the flop counts and how it's attributed to, training versus inference. And I mean, you can just see inference like, hockey sticking, right? Which is crazy. And a lot of that is, predicated on RL. There's obviously like a ton of inference because we're shipping products, and when you release products, people use them, and that's inference. But also we broke down, just pure inference for applications, and then inference for RL, and inference in general is just like skyrocketing at this point. And so, I think when you get into the RL world, it's environments and verifiable rewards. It's understanding how to shape rewards. I mean, we have a stack internally. We do asynchronous RL, and it uses a lot of flops. I mean, it uses a ton of compute, and it's definitely a way for you to bring in, just like basically create a lot of in-distribution capabilities into your models in a way that you couldn't before. So I see that as definitely an area like that we're investing in a ton, and it's going to improve our models significantly.
But there's some of the common RL environments, like the obvious ones, like math, for example.
Yeah.
Were there any environments that you found that were surprisingly useful?
I mean, there's like the usual suspects. I mean, coding is one. Math, like, if you look at like what Axiom is doing with like creating a lean environment, and or other, there's a few math startups that are doing that. I think like browser is an obvious one, and like computer use, shopping. A lot of these are like really interesting because they become like you have to kind of sandbox them because like you can't actually, if you're doing like a shopping environment, for example, like you can't take stuff and put it in like an actual basket, right, and pull things out, because actually it's like game theory, right? It actually you change the environment, it changes like the dynamics of things, and if you actually like literally buy something or put something in your shopping cart or whatever. So we actually have to create these like sandboxed environments for these different areas we want to improve our models for. So it gets pretty tricky, but yeah, I mean, there's a ton of like long tail environments that I'd see. And then there's like folks like Prime Intellect, for example, who've created like an open hub that they have private environments, they have public environments. And it's kind of interesting. This is one of the reasons I like the open source world, is because like creativity is like everywhere. people create like really weird environments and stuff you would never think of. And some of it's just like more like an eval, but some of them are like multi-turn. Some of them are like super long horizon tasks. So it's actually it's like creative, and it's like going to be interesting to see what the open source community does here.
Yeah. So Microsoft said 30% of their code is now written by AI. Dario predicted that by the end of the year, 90% of all code will be written by AI. So what percentage of code at Meta is written by AI? And where do you see it going?
I mean, there's a lot of code being generated by AI. I think we have an internal tool called DevMate, which has a bunch of models underneath it. You can kind of select between different models. And I would say if you would have asked me like a year ago, like how useful would something like that be? Like a coding agent, a coding review agent, code generation, kind of a cursor style, tab type of experience. Like, would that be used by like the most senior engineers? I would have said, hell no. These people are like experts. They're like level 8, 9 super senior engineers who've been writing code for decades. I've seen in the last year things change completely. I've seen some of the most senior engineers, the people I've like worked with for years and years, most well-respected engineers, some of them in the field, and they're using Cloud Code. They're using like DevMate and these tools, and they don't use it to like just write everything for them, but they'll like DevMate will like write the scaffolding. It will. We've actually seen like we have a project called Popcorn. Has anybody heard of it? Project Popcorn? No, it's a pretty like deep geeky project. It's basically focused on LLMs for generating like math kernels for, because in like LLMs, you have these things called like attention layers and gem layers, and basically everything's a matrix multiplication when you kind of boil things down to it. And so if you can basically generate more efficient kernels that run on, say, NVIDIA or AMD or even our own silicon and Meta, that improves the overall efficiency or the speed of these models. And so we built an LLM last year. We post-trained it on a bunch of Triton code, which is another project for writing kernels. And we found that we can actually like improve significantly over like the open general models like DeepSeek and that. Now I would say like the general models are actually doing really well. Like you can actually ask it to like write, you give it the shape of like the matrix multiply, and like you give it the target like platform, it'll actually go and write a kernel for you. And will it be perfect? Not every time, definitely not. But like it writes enough of it where like an expert can kind of come in and like fix the little rough edges, and it probably saves them, like hours, if not days or weeks sometimes when they're doing it. So I can't give you like an exact percentage, but I can tell you like folks are definitely like organically using AI in their everyday like development, and they're also being encouraged to use it as well, because like productivity, like the number of diffs landing is like just the amount of code is just like this avalanche of code that's like being generated and being developed by our engineers. So it's pretty wild.
It looks like a lot of the effort is shifting more to the review stage.
Yeah, review makes sense, right? You want to, although I'd want someone to like, or an agent to be able to like generate all the scaffold, all the boilerplate, and do a lot of like the heavy lifting stuff that I don't want to deal with, and make it understandable for me. And then I want to write my code, and then I want to have a review agent come in and say, you could optimize here, oh, you missed that. Mm-hmm. And that's actually like, for me, that's like how I would learn versus like having it kind of like completely vibe coded completely for me, which is like, I don't learn anything, right?
I still found that super useful during the design stage and earlier. So while writing a design document, it can really help you to find some blind spots that you had before, suggest some ideas, something that you might have not have been aware of before.
Yep.
You've been involved in PyTorch. So I think PyTorch is one of the prime examples for building a successful open source community. What are some things that you learned along the way? Do you have any recommendations? What's important to build a successful and sustainable open source community?
Yeah, PyTorch was, it's for those who don't know, it started, I would say, like with a very small team, probably under eight folks. It was really written mostly by Adam Pashka, even though Sumit gets all the accolades. Adam Pashka is at Google now. He was an intern reporting to Sumit. This is probably now almost 10 years ago. And Adam is a once in a generation, like truly 10x engineer. He's incredible. And it kind of started out as like, how do we take this Lua Torch project and essentially port the interface over to Python? And there was a lot of resistance at first. And it started out as a very like scrappy project. I think the biggest things I learned around PyTorch were, I think the community had to have a voice and feel like there has to be agency or felt agency with the project. And we went out of our way to make that happen. I think to the point where we actually would handicap sometimes our own internal projects, like their schedules or their release dates, so that they wouldn't like be able to preempt, I would say, like external projects. We took feedback. We had, even for a big company, sometimes we would prioritize like external collaborations, basically in favor of like in some internal needs. And I get yelled at many times over the years for doing that. We had like Uber building autonomous cars, right? And they're like, hey, we need help with this. And then we had our internal teams needing something. And we were trying to prove out a new, this thing called Torch Script, which sadly we're now deprecating after all these years. But we really would like lean in and make it feel like a community. We'd work with partners. We would, provide ownership across the project for different modules. So it was one of those things where like you felt like it really had like a real true community vibe, even though like, Facebook was backing it and really was driving like a lot of it. And I mean, it worked. I mean, I think we would really give a voice to everyone. And like if somebody wanted to blog or talk about the project or whatever, like I said, we would actually like put them above our own internal teams. And that resonated. It wasn't pretty internally, because, we went from an 8-person team to, almost 700 or 650 people, now after this last reorg, like spread out, but, went from a very small team to now like a quite a large team, building it and using it obviously across the company and working across a bunch of different domains and so on. So I would say like giving the voice, agency are probably like the biggest things that we can do, to help people.
It's pretty interesting that you down prioritize these internal projects.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things that some other projects sometimes they get accused of the opposite, and that's when it starts to feel like you're losing track with the community.
Yeah, there's definitely like engineers and folks across that are kind of like labeled as like pure open source, like they like working on the project and doing these things, right? And then there's like the folks that are like too internal focused. And then there's like a blend or some like people that sit in between. And I think like the key for me has always been like understanding the selfish reason why like open source, why working in the open like does matter. And I think that's helped us a lot. And if you look at things in like the absence of open, like what do you get? You get basically, you get a closed tech island, which
homegrown systems.
Exactly. Homegrown systems that are like, probably not going to be state of the art, because everyone else is doing something else, and the world is way bigger than, no matter how good your engineers are, the world is way bigger than your company. So it's a powerful thing, getting the force multiplication that you get from a community. So.
All right. We're almost out of time, and maybe just one quick question. Sure. To wrap up. Today, the Flower community is watching. We have many active builders in the Flower community. So, what is something that where do you think what are some AI areas that you feel are underexplored? What's something that more people should look into, spend more time on, explore?
For those who know me, I'm a big fan of like the physical sciences and like AI for science. I was actually just like grabbing a coffee with one of our robotics VPs earlier today, and she's investing in robotics significantly now as an angel. And like I think like anywhere where like the kind of computational in silico world meets the physical world is like really interesting. Like I think when I was in FAIR, we had a team that was doing protein folding, and they split out into a startup called Evolutionary Scale AI, and I invested in them, and they had really strong expertise in both kind of like the wet lab and like biology, like true domain expertise in biology and drug discovery and experience in, as well as computational biology. But they also had like really strong AI people too. And it's actually amazing when you can kind of bring those cultures like together. I've seen, I've seen like universities where those departments don't ever talk, where you have like pure experimentalists and have pure like computational people and pure AI people. So to me, like it's kind of fun to see like what happens when you bring like experts together in those areas. So I think materials is another area. So anything like in that area, we have a team at Metastill that does open chemistry, and they're working on things like how do you generate basically like first like kind of de novo catalyst material catalyst materials for things like green carbon generation and direct air capture for carbon capture. I think these are like areas where you can have like real impact in the world. And that's what's exciting for me. Like, I think it's really cool that we can build, new like chatbots and new agents that help us like stand up infrastructure. That's really great. It helps our engineers. But like, if you can work on things that actually have physical presence in the world, that help us accelerate materials, that allow us to get to, fusion, whatever it is, like that, those are areas that I tend to like look out for and will personally even invest in. So.
Awesome. I think that's a perfect way to end it and to wrap up. Thanks so much for taking the time today. Again, I again learned a lot.
Cool.
So yeah,
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.